Hello, everybody. I'm Phil Brandt, President and CEO of AIM Employers Association, and welcome to This Week at Work.
This Week at Work is the only show about the workplace that offers you front row seats and a microphone, featuring experts in human resources and employment law to bring you practical, timely, and accurate insights so you can more effectively lead your organization. It's Thursday, August 8th, episode 290. Today, AIM goes for the gold with a money update that lines up the compensation trends of 2024 and imagines them racing down the track to predict what it might take to win in 2025. Phil hands the baton off to crowd favorite Mikey Mac, who can flat out book it when it comes to getting out ahead of the competition and holding them off with strategies that deliver value to employees and employers alike. Learn to sprint past slowing inflation, hurdle over the rising unemployment, and still hear the sweet sound of your company vision playing from the podium. All this and more on This Week at Work.
All right. Good morning. Welcome back, everyone. Bert, good morning. I'm coming to you from Lake of the Ozarks. You've been here before, I know. It's a great place. We're having the Missouri State SHRM Conference. It's been a great program. Ogletree is positioned directly across from our booth, and they're doing a great job down here. It's a fantastic week of weather. It's a lot better weather than you're getting out in North Carolina there, Mikey. I want to invite you back to the program and say welcome. I hear your wife's getting, 12, 15 inches of rain already where she's at?
Yeah, and there's actually a tornado on the ground, so she's headed to the bathroom. So hopefully keep our fingers crossed.
All right. Well, hopefully she'll be
Mikey, where are you that you left her there alone?
I'm in New York in our office in New York City, and I can't get home. They've canceled all the flights, so here I am.
Sure.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's what she said.
We hope she will be okay and keep us up to date. If anything goes wrong and you need to get off the phone, we understand.
You got it.
But we appreciate you being here. We're going to get some updates on compensation trends and what's going on. And earlier this year, we made a prediction based upon a survey that we did. And we said there was a couple things that were going to occur during this calendar year, according to business executives. And one is recruiting was going to continue to be really difficult, which was going to be complicated by wage pressure and compressions. And I'd like to get some impact results on that from you, Mikey, because I know that from a recruiting standpoint, it's still very difficult to recruit talent and find the type of talent that employers are looking for. In fact, I could tell you, we've done more recruiting at AIM this year than we've done any other year. The other thing that we said back in January is that training and development, that we're going to take an internal approach and invest in training and developing supervisors and managers and for other hard to fill jobs. And the other thing that's happened here at AIM this year is we've had more training and development than we've had in any other year in our history as well. So those two things definitely have played out in the first half, and I can't wait to get some insight from you on what's happening with wages and wage compression, and maybe even a look into the future of what next year might look like on wage increases. But first, Bert, let's get back to you. And are you ready to get to Lawyer on the Clock?
Yeah. Do you want to get to some poll questions first, Phil?
I will. Thank you. It's been a while since I forgot to do those.
I haven't been able to do that to you in a while.
I know I'm out of sorts. I'm not in my studio. I'm at the lake here. I was hoping to have a view of the lake, and right outside my room is filled with gnats, and I'm swatting, so I can't do that. All right, poll question. Here we go. What has your average year-to-date salary adjustment been in 2024? And then the second part of this question is, what are you planning for your average year-to-date salary adjustment in 2025? So what's the increase so far, and what are you planning going forward? And I think that would be great. If you have some comments, we'd love to get those. You can add those right where you take the poll. If you have any questions for Mikey or for Bert or I, let us know right in that same area there, and we'll try and get to those right away. Bert, I've gotten so many good compliments on the Lawyer on the Clock segment. It's the fan favorite by far. So I'm going to pass it over to you and say, Nick, let's pull that lever and get going.
All right, it's time to look into what's trending in employment law. Lawyer, you're on the clock.
So, Phil, we've got several topics today. We're going to do a couple bonus topics today on Lawyer on the Clock segment. So the first one, I always just find stuff like this entertaining, is that a little over a week ago, the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., their civil rights lawyers at the Department of Justice are trying to form their own union amid an uncertain future. And that uncertain future is the presidential election. So the lawyers in the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division have launched a union organizing campaign with a really aggressive timeline to try to secure bargaining status ahead of the next presidential administration. They're attempting to form what would be the Department of Justice's first known union of litigators. And that's parallel to a more advanced effort inside the department's environmental division. And it's focused on maintaining stable working conditions such as telework flexibility in the face of an uncertain future. The employee organizers are also trying to overcome, quote unquote, a widespread misunderstanding among civil rights division lawyers that they're ineligible to unionize, according to materials disseminated to the staff in late July. So they're trying to tell people they are eligible to organize. So that's going to be a fight that they're going to have. And the organizing committee is aiming to hold a representation election by October 2024. So just a couple months from now, they're hoping to have a vote
right before the election. Yeah,
that's exactly right. And you can definitely connect this to the presidential election and the rank and file lawyers at the Department of Justice. They're concerned that with the new presidential administration, they want to have a union so that they could try to preserve their jobs.
Okay. Have you experienced attorneys organizing before any time, or is this something that's happened, or there's been an attempt?
I have never seen this before.
Yeah,
I've never seen this before anywhere, and it'll be really interesting. I mean, clearly, when the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division circulated material telling people they're ineligible to unionize, that probably gets to that point, and they're trying to tell people that they are eligible to unionize.
Well, this is going to be an interesting one to keep our eye on. I got no skin in the game, but I'm very interested to see what happens. You, however, my friend, have skin in the game, because I can't imagine this going through the Ogletree files and systems of, hey, let's get together and get our union organizing meeting going on and seeing you carrying a banner there, Bert. I just don't see it.
Not going to happen.
Yeah. All right. What else you got?
The next one I thought was kind of interesting. Here in the state of Missouri, our university, our largest university here in Missouri, Mizzou, is eliminating its DE&I division, the entire division. Really kind of an interesting move, and we've talked a lot about this in weeks past about sort of the trend in business. And the Vice Chancellor for Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity, Maurice Gibson, is departing to take a role at a historically Black college and university in Arkansas. And his entire department is going to be disbanded, and staff is going to be moved to different departments. And the president of the university, Moon Choi, basically stated, as a university, we receive about $500 million per year in appropriations and $200 million in capital one-time projects. And if we don't receive the $700 million per year, we would have to eliminate every single position in all of the colleges that we have at the University of Missouri. That's not a risk I want to take. I want to have a good relationship with the supporters of our university, and our biggest supporters are the taxpayers, and by proxy, they're the elected officials that represent them. And they say that they would have made these changes anyway, even without some of the political pressure. But it is interesting to see that Mizzou is dropping its DE&I division, especially when Mizzou was sort of on the forefront of some of these efforts early on.
Yeah, that was big news when I heard that, and I think the taxpayers in Missouri, of course, I'm from Missouri, so a little bit closer to that than I would be if it was in another state, another place. And you've always talked about the pendulum swings a little bit, back and forth, and that will come back around. I think that's what we're seeing here. I think they went a little too far. You've been keeping us up to date on, the ins and outs, if you will, of what we should do and having goals, and when do we actually go too far and break the law by establishing some of these goals. I'm not suggesting Mizzou has done that, but you're definitely hearing the tax base say, hey, I think you're going too far.
Yeah, I would agree with that. On a more interesting case, in my opinion, last week, the Ninth Circuit, that means the court all the way out in California and some of the Western states, they issued a unanimous decision that I think is going to impact a lot of people, a lot of harassment cases. And in that 38-page decision, they essentially reinstated a former federal prison psychologist lawsuit that had been dismissed at the trial level. And the lawsuit was over a now defunct Instagram page run by a corrections lieutenant. And the account was allegedly replete with offensive memes, both directed at the medical professionals and others. So, and Phil, you might be asking yourself, well, what does that mean, offensive memes? Well, apparently on this Instagram page, there were memes about raping this particular correction psychologist on there when she planned to host a party at her home, which she canceled after viewing the post, as well as several others posts that mocked her for lodging complaints about the harassment. Apparently, the supervisor also used memes to ridicule women's bodies after giving birth, with several specifically addressing breastfeeding that had vulgar imagery attached to each one. And according to case filings, dozens of coworkers, including higher-ups, followed the page, with some liking and commenting on the posts and some discussing them positively in the actual workplace. So why am I talking about this case, Phil? Because the court here basically said that the judges rejected the idea that only conduct that occurs inside the physical workplace can be actionable. And they said particularly here, because of the ubiquity of social media and the ready use of it to harass and bully both inside and outside of the physical workplace, that this conduct that occurred outside of work was enough to support a claim of harassment inside the workplace. So,
and this was not a work Instagram page. This was a private Instagram.
Correct, but a lot of people from work were on this page, and so I think this serves as a warning to employers. Phil, I know you and I've talked about this in the past, and my advice always, especially when you have supervisors involved, is that supervisors really should not be connected to or friends with or following their subordinate employees on social media. It's just a bad idea.
Yeah, it is. And actually, this is something just as an FYI to you and all of our listeners, and some of the advice that we've gotten from yourself there, Bert, is at least once a year, I have this conversation with all of our employees about their personal interest and social media activity. And basically what I'm really encouraging is for people not to follow each other and participate in each other's social media activity just for reasons like this. It goes bad, whether it's purposeful, mean, unintended, intended to be funny, whatever, it goes bad. And as employers, we're stuck having to manage that. And it's never easy. And often we don't know about it if we're not involved in it.
Well, and the other thing is sometimes when you're friends with subordinate employees on social media, you learn things about their religion, disability, other protected characteristics. And once you know that, even though you learn it in a non-work setting, you know it. And so, you
can't unknow it, can you?
Right. You can't unknow it. And so, you don't want to put yourself in a position of being accused of discriminating against somebody because of what you learned about that person on social media.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a close one. And I know when we've done programs in the past, we get tons of questions about social media.
Mm-hmm.
maybe we can do a deep dive on that on an episode coming up, because that's always of particular interest. All
Yeah,
right,
that
there, Lawyer on the
sounds
clock.
good.
What else you have for us?
All right,
Anything
I'm
else?
gonna keep going. Yeah, we got a couple other little interesting ones. These will be one of them will be a really quick hitter. A group of Democrat lawmakers last week introduced a bill that would overhaul civil rights law and eliminate the tipped minimum wage. Think about restaurants. This new act is called the Bringing an End to Harassment by Enhancing Accountability and Rejecting Discrimination in the Workplace Act. In other words, Bill, it could be called the Be Heard Act, and it would do several things. So right now, Title VII only applies to employers with 15 or more employees and has a 180-day statute of limitations that under certain circumstances can extend to 300 days. What this would do is it would extend civil rights protections to all employees. So if you're an employer with one or more employees, it would expand that. It would include independent contractors and interns, and extend that limit for reporting harassment. It would also do away or bar with mandatory arbitration and pre-employment non-disclosure agreements for all allegations of discrimination, and that would build on laws passed in 2022 that outlawed forced arbitration and non-disclosure agreements for sexual harassment. The proposed legislation, like I said, would give workers more time to report harassment. And significantly, this new law would eliminate the damage caps on compensatory and punitive damages under the federal civil rights laws. And again, they've also snuck in there eliminating the $2.13 tip minimum wage credit that restaurants can take advantage of. So what I see this bill as is sort of a wish list of the Democrats on what they would like to have passed in civil rights legislation. It's not going to pass before the election, but it does sort of telegraph what you could expect to see if Kamala Harris wins the election in November. And if she doesn't win the election in November, you could expect to see the Democrats trying to push these types of policies.
All right. I know you got one more.
One more. And I just wanted to follow up real quickly. There was a really interesting article floating around on the internet. It was an interview or an article written by the Papa John's founder, John Schneider. And the title of it really builds on what we talked about last week and probably segues pretty good into Mikey Mac's talk today about
almost like we planned it.
Yep, it's almost like we planned it. And the title is The Troubling Future for Fast Food Franchisees. And basically in here, in the article, he says between rising prices, tax increases, and minimum wage hikes, the entire fast food industry, including pizza delivery, is at an inflection point. What happens next will determine the type of food future generations of Americans enjoy, how much we spend on dining out, what our cities and suburbs look like, and what sort of culture we export to the rest of the world. He cites some examples of formerly prolific chains that have fallen into obscurity, like Bob Evans, Long John Silver's, Godfather's Pizza, and Checkers and Rallies. And basically, at the end of the day, what he's saying here is that fast food has always been known as a quick, easy, and above all, affordable way for middle-class families to enjoy a meal. In recent years, the fast food prices have begun outpacing wage gains for working Americans. As a result, news outlets are filled with stories about disgruntled customers complaining about the skyrocketing prices of seemingly fast food. And then he references that study we talked about last week, where he says this is conceptually becoming even more difficult in some places like California, when Governor Gavin Newsom signed a law that raised the minimum wage for fast food workers to $20 per hour. Before the law even took effect, fast food companies in that state cut 10,000 jobs, with thousands more job losses coming in the first month after the new minimum wage took effect. So again, just kind of builds on what we talked about last week, that you know, I think there are some unintended consequences, but you have to wonder that we could sort of see this coming in advance of the new law. And so it does make me kind of question, maybe these are intended consequences. I'm just not quite sure. But the bottom line is when you start putting this kind of wage pressure on the lowest paying jobs in the economy, and that creates some compression. And I think that's the idea. They want to compress wages. They want those low jobs to be higher paying, and that forces everything else above it up. And but one of the consequences is that business will adjust, and at some point they're going to go out of business, which I think is the point of his article. So I think with that really does segue us into our talk with Mikey.
Hey, Mike, let's just have you continue on. I know you must have a million things you want to say about what Bert just introduced there. So welcome back to the program, Mike. What's your take on that?
Well, yeah, and you think about that along with what's been going on with the Fair Labor Standard Act change, right? I mean, one of the biggest surprises to me this year was when came July 1, we were all saying, oh, don't worry about that change. The courts are going to put an injunction on like they did before. And of course, all they did was they did an injunction for Texas, but not for the rest of the country. So now our minimum to become an exempt employee has gone up is 23.4% for July 1. And then when it moves again in January, that's another 33% increase. So that means we're looking at a 58% increase of what the minimum wage is to be considered exempt. And what that has done is exactly what's happened in California with the fast food minimum wage, the compression. It created that compression because a lot of companies are saying, well, wait a minute, I don't want these exempt employees that were not getting overtime now to be overtime eligible. And so they start moving people, but then of course they start changing their whole wage system in order to accomplish that. And then we have a domino effect. So we're spending a lot of time right now, especially with a lot of AIM members, looking at what the impact is and the compression that's being created at the lower levels between minimum wage changes around the country, but now with this FLSA change. And that's something that's not really counted in when they say, well, what's the average increase for the past year, right? Because normally they're looking at budget numbers, right? They're asking, you know, well, what did you change the base pay by on an average for your normal increase? Well, yeah, and you can see we just did a poll, and I think it's running between 3 and 5% is pretty much what we're finding most of the organizations are doing. And that tracks very well with the BLS and what they reported year after year, July to July, that it was running about 3.6% adjustment. However, ADP had a report which looks at total wages in their system from one year to the other. And in that same period, they're reporting over 5% in adjustment. So, you know, one is your normal adjustment. The other is your total wage adjustment. So that all has to be taken in consideration. And so I think we're getting ready for, if the January 1 change is not stopped, then we're going to see our minimum to be exempt at $58,000 a year. And that is going to compress many pay systems. And there's going to be, unbudgeted or non-budgeted adjustments that will start occurring along the way.
So Mike, the viewers of our program, however, had a little additional insight, and that was that they heard from me my prediction that July 1 increase was almost certainly going to go into effect.
Oh, okay.
But they also heard that I'm not as certain about the January 1 increase. The mechanisms for doing those increases legally are a little bit different. The increase that took place in July looked a lot like the increase that took place during the Trump administration, which was not really challenged and went into effect without most really being challenged. And so that's what that July 1 increase looks like. The January 1 increase looks a lot more like the increase that was supposed to go into effect during the Obama administration, which did get enjoined. So I think there's a chance that January 1 increase does not actually end up happening, but we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah, because if it does happen, then that will change the nature. Of course, here in the great state of New York, where I'm broadcasting from today, we're already there. So, you know, we've already taken care of that, and we've already started laying off everybody because we can't afford to do it. So one of the things keep in mind, I always warn everyone when they look at, you know, projections from all like World at Work and all the survey houses that are now saying, well, it looks like 3.5%, you know, for wage adjustments for next year. That is just normal wage adjustments, right? Either it's cost of living or merit increases. But that's not taking into consideration market adjustments, the FLSA potential. There's a lot of other dollars that when we look at the total cost of increases throughout the year. And so we have to kind of monitor that as well, and have to remind everyone, keep that in mind going forward as you're looking for next year. I mean, you know, one of the other indicators, Phil, we always talked about in the past was Social Security and the feds, right? So right now, the feds are projecting a 2.7% adjustment for federal workers, and the Social Security projection is around the same, about 2.7%. So often people say, well, if that's what that's going to be, then that's what we're going to find for wages. But we're still seeing our survey houses like World at Work and Mercer and Willis Towers Watson already are now projecting around 3.9% going into 2025. So it's still higher than what we're seeing from the feds. And that's getting still over that average 3% that we had pre-COVID for many years.
Well, and I can tell you, you know, there's still those organizations that have been in front of this curve or that are in the middle of the curve, and plenty that are behind the curve. And when we're looking at the reality of what's happening when we're trying to employ people, replace workers, expand our business, there are still plenty of organizations that haven't stayed with the trend over the last 4 or 5 years. And for that reason, they're having a really difficult time with that internal equity matching the market that they're having to hire from, or the internal equity that they have trouble with when they're trying to retain some of their good talent, who is, you know, attracted away for these types of increases. So, Mike, when you work with organizations, I know one of the things that you're often doing is you're saying, look, you have to budget for a GWI, general wage increase, but then that's the easy part. The hard part is creating that equitable adjustments that occur for where people are out of range or hard to retain or hard to hire positions. And you actually suggest looking at it in 2 buckets, not one necessarily.
We are. And it's interesting. I went back and took a look over the last 6 months because when we do the compression review, which gets into, of course, pay equity issues as well, when we're updating pay systems and the effect of the outside world on that, the adjustments on compression, meaning where we're placing people equitably within the range, has been averaging about another 2% of payroll. So think about that. That's that 2%. When we talk about 5% is what ADP is saying in terms of the overall movement, I may be giving 3% on the basic wage adjustment, but I'm still having to spend this other 2% to correct issues within my pay system, especially with pay transparency everywhere, right? Because that has just really pushed, you know, all of us to be careful and relook at the compression internally, because once we're transparent, it raises all kind of questions. I always tell people, I think, Bert, you heard me say this, is that transparency leads to equity, right? Once you have transparency, you're going to have an issue of pay equity. So you better be prepared for both. All right.
Yeah, that's right.
The other thing that I know I struggle with, and many of the leaders I talk to struggle with, is really that balance between the model and the system in which you believe your business is using to be fair and equitable to all employees, and the expectations that people have for all the reasons that Bert was sharing about, you know, the Papa John's comment, minimum wage is raising. People believe the value or the worth that they should have, and they have data often to support it, but it's not the data your organization is using to establish a benchmark. And I know our focus often there is we have to educate managers where the data comes from, what data we're using, and we have to make sure we're using the right type of data. There's a lot of data available you have to be careful with. And that, and that creates lots of problems, lots of employee relation problems that just lead to disgruntled employees.
True. What we've now done in pretty much every program we work on, we really require that at the end, when we're implementing and we're getting ready to communicate, we are running Comp 101 for supervisors and managers. We're actually running a session, taking them through not just the concepts, but how those concepts apply to their organization. So market strategy, okay, here's a concept of what we should be looking at. What did we look at for your organization? So you have some ammunition when someone says, my buddy, when I was talking to my buddy at the bar, he's making, $10,000 more a year than me. I'm underpaid, but your buddy works for a $1 billion company doing something totally different than us. So we try to educate to help the manager to answer some of those questions, because I think it's important. It's HR has that role, but really supervisors and managers have to have a good foundation, because employees are going to turn to them first, and they'll trust them instead of the manager in the past saying, go talk to HR.
Yeah, I actually think what happens is employees turn to each other first.
Yeah.
Then they get there and rally their support and courage, then to take it to the manager. They get a response from the manager and they take it right back to all the employees. And what did he say? What did she say? What's going to happen next? And that's when everything just starts to fall apart, particularly if we don't have the right information. I really appreciate that you do that for our members, because it's a great way to, intersect that with the right information. Bert, I just want to say thanks. You guys do look fabulous here. I'm off to Indianapolis, the Indy SHRM conference next week. And then at the end of the month, I'm going down to the Florida SHRM. I understand those are the two largest SHRM state conferences. They're a lot of fun. We see our members there. We have a great time. I've seen a lot of your clients there as well. They said to tell you hello. They love your Lawyer on the Clock segment. Mike, I've seen the companies you work with for AAIM here, and you've gotten some accolades as well. So congratulations, Mike.
And
appreciate
Phil,
the work both of you do.
Phil, I'll see you in Bloomington the end of the month.
And that's right. We're in Bloomington for the
Central
conference
Illinois
there.
SHRM. Right.
That's right. So lots of things going on. I just want to say thank you to everyone. Producer Nick, what do you got there for us? You're trying to head us off here. What do you got, Nick?
We do have a question that came in, and the question is, and this may be a carryover to our next show, but with all the wage increases over the last few years, do you have any current data showing the change in percentage of payroll benefit cost to companies? Thanks.
Mike, anything on that?
Not off the top of my head, but there is data available on that. So that might be something we could help you with.
Yeah, I need to reach out to our USI partners and maybe bring them in to help answer that question. But also within the AAIM wage and payroll and benefit survey data that we have, we are definitely seeing the rising increases in double digits in the space of benefits to go along with that. I can't speak to that without having that data in front of me and preparing a little better statement, but we would be happy to do so. That's a great question.
Way to stump us at the end.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Nick. We're closing on a high note. We appreciate that. Okay. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back here next week at the same time. Until then, go out and be good to somebody. Bye-bye.
Thank you once again for tuning in to This Week at Work. If you enjoy the show, please share it with your colleagues. Forward our invites. Share the link, aimea.org/This Week at Work, or follow or subscribe wherever you get your news and entertainment. LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, we're everywhere you are. Don't forget you can be part of the show. Send your questions and comments anytime to info@thisweek.work. We'll see you next week, 7:30 a.m. Central Time, when we discuss what's happening this week at work.